All right, now that the witness has been sworn before direct, I'm going to inquire of the witness. Officer Greenhalgh, have you listened in on or in any way observed or heard any of the testimony that's occurred in this trial thus far?
No, I have not.
Okay, have you discussed with anyone else their testimony they've given at trial?
No, I have not.
Okay, thank you for that affirmation. Mr. Wixom, you can inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Greenhalgh, I believe I'm mispronouncing your name. It's Greenhalgh, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay, I apologize. Will you please spell your full name for the record?
Oh, first name is spelled Alyssa, and the last name is spelled Greenhalgh.
Thank you. And ma'am, can you tell the jury, where is it that you work?
Currently, I work in Rexburg, Idaho for the Rexburg Police Department.
What is your job title there?
I'm a patrol officer.
How long have you done that?
Total about 7 years.
7 years with the Rexburg Police Department?
About 3 with Rexburg and 4 years before that with the Fremont County Sheriff's Office.
What was your job title at the Fremont County Sheriff's Office?
I was a patrol deputy.
And can you explain to the jury what post training or otherwise do you have as a law enforcement officer?
Currently, I hold an advanced certificate through the Idaho Post Academy, as well as some other miscellaneous specialty trainings.
And as part of your work for Fremont County, was it one of your functions to respond to calls about unattended deaths?
Yes.
From your perspective as law enforcement, please tell the jury, what is an unattended death and what is your function as law enforcement?
An unattended death is, generally speaking, any death that occurs where the person is not under a physician's care. Typically, somebody will call when they find a family or friend or loved one that has passed. And my duty as a patrol officer or deputy initially on scene is to respond before the detectives and the coroner get there, to check for obvious signs of foul play, and then request resources as needed.
And when you say foul play, can you tell the jury what types of things do you look for when you're looking for signs of foul play?
Yes, so typically we're looking for obvious injuries, disheveled houses, like if furniture is broken or pushed around, obvious injuries being gunshot wounds, stab wounds, needles, drug overdoses, things like that.
So with any given unattended death, is it fair to say that you respond with that role in mind, trying to either identify or rule out some foul play?
Correct.
I want to draw your attention back to October 19th of 2019. Do you recall responding to an unattended death call for a Tammy Daybell?
I do.
At that time, prior to your response to the scene, had you ever heard Tammy Daybell's name?
No, I had not.
Had you ever heard Chad Daybell's name?
No,
So you weren't familiar with either one of them?
I was not.
Who dispatches you to an unattended death?
Whichever dispatch officer is working that day.
So is it fair to say that when there's an unattended death, that someone will call into law enforcement and 911 or otherwise, and then they'll find an officer on duty and send them to the scene?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state wishes to request admission of what we believe is a stipulated exhibit number 233, which is a recorded 911 call made by Garth and Chad Daybell on the day of Tammy's death.
Any objection? Okay, exhibit 233 then is the audio file of that call. It will be admitted by stipulation. Just make sure we have the correct exhibit submitted to the clerk, and then if you wish to publish, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would the court have me send it up now, or should I play it first?
As long as you're convinced it's the right thing, you can go ahead and start publishing.
Thank you. Your Honor, would it be possible for, I think I skipped a step here, us to broadcast this over the court system by plugging my HDMI?
911, where's your emergency? We're at 202 North, 1900 East. What's going on? We just found my mom. She's on the ground frozen, or she's stiff, and I don't know.
Are you in Madison County or Fremont County?
Hello, I'm Chad, the husband. She's clearly dead.
Oh,
We don't
so
know.
sorry. Okay. Okay. Are you in Rexburg, or because your address shows
Fremont
Rexburg
County.
address, but you're in Fremont County?
It's a mile past.
Okay.
Line. Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh. Yeah, she's not even, she's frozen.
Okay. Can I get your name?
Chad Daybell. Oh, man. Oh.
Okay, Chad. I'm gonna get somebody up to you right now. Okay.
Yeah, the corner where the blinking yellow light is with the red house.
Yes, sir. Red house on the corner,
Yeah,
blinking yellow light.
right.
Okay. We'll get somebody out to you. Okay. I'm so sorry.
Okay,
If you need anything else, you call me back. Okay.
okay.
Okay. Bye bye.
Ma'am, to the best of your recollection, was that particular phone call related to your response to Tammy Daybell?
Yes,
Prior to responding to this, let me withdraw that. To the best you recall, what time of day was it that you were responding?
it was approximately 6 a.m.
And was it light outside yet?
I don't think so.
Prior to your response that morning, approximately how many times had you personally been involved with responding to an unattended death?
Probably 5 to 10.
And when you did, in fact, arrive, what was the first thing that you observed?
I observed Garth Daybell in the living room. He's the one that let me into the house. And then Chad came into the living room shortly after I arrived. And I just asked them what was going on and to show me where Tammy was.
And did they do that?
They did.
Let me pause and ask, at that point in time, was anybody else at the home?
No,
Did anybody else later arrive at the home that morning?
yes.
Who do you recall arriving at the home?
The deputy coroner arrived, the coroner arrived, and then some family members also arrived later.
And for the jury's sake, to the best we can identify those people by name.
Yes, sorry. The deputy coroner, Cammie Wilmore, the coroner, Brenda Dye, and I'm not sure who the family was. I didn't speak with them after they arrived.
Were you aware if there was a male or female family member that arrived?
I think both. Several of his children showed up as well.
So you were explaining that you arrived and you made contact with Garth and then Chad?
Correct.
Just to help the jury have a picture in their mind, what was the layout of the home, the best that you can recall?
The living room is the first room that you come into, and then there's a hallway to the right. There are several bedrooms and a bathroom. Directly behind the living room across the hallway was the kitchen, and then to the left was the garage.
Okay. And relative to the front door, did you come in the front door?
I did.
Relative to that front door, where is the room that you ultimately saw Tammy's body in?
To the right at the end of the hallway.
When you came through the front door, where do you recall both Garth and or Chad being inside the home?
In the living room.
So could you explain again, what was the first conversation that you had with either one?
I asked them where Tammy was and what had happened, and then they walked me back to the bedroom where her body was.
At that point in time, did either one of them seem to have any emotion or anything like that going on?
Yes.
Both, or which one?
Chad was definitely more emotional than Garth was. He was sobbing and then would gasp for air. Garth was a little bit more reserved and didn't say very much.
So when you got back to the room where Tammy was, what was the first thing that you observed? What was the first thing that you What was the first thing that you observed?
I observed Tammy's body on the bed, and her feet were hanging off the corner of the bed, and the mattress was pushed off the box spring just a little bit, and she was covered up with a blanket up to about her shoulders.
In that moment, did you notice anything else about Tammy's body?
Not from the doorway until I moved in closer to her.
Before you moved in closer, did you engage in Chad in any conversation about what had gone on?
Yes, during the walk back and while I first entered the bedroom, he was kind of explaining to me the course of events that had happened that morning.
What do you recall him explaining to you at that time?
He had told me that about midnight, Tammy had woken up with a coughing fit, and he said she had vomited on the bedroom floor and then had moved into the bathroom down the hallway and had continued vomiting. And he said he got up to help her clean up and then put her back to bed. And then they both went back to sleep. And then at approximately 5:40 a.m., he had felt the blankets shift off of him in bed and had woken up, and he said that he had thought Tammy had fallen off the bed. So he told her to get back on the bed. And then when she didn't answer him, he stood back up, turned the lights on, and found that she was unresponsive.
Did he indicate at that point whether Tammy had fallen all the way off the bed or just partly?
He did. He indicated that she had fallen partially off the bed because her feet were wrapped in the blanket and the sheets. And so her feet were still up on top of the mattress, but the side of her head was on the floor.
What did Chad do or say next, if anything?
He said after he had turned the lights on and found her, he checked her and then called to Garth for help to come help move her back onto the bed, which Garth came over and they both moved her body back up onto the bed.
So when you first, let me withdraw that. This is being explained to you as you're walking into the room where Tammy's body is.
That's correct.
So when you first walk into that room, did what you saw with Tammy's body match the description of what Chad had just explained to you?
Yes, it did.
And what about the covers on the bed?
The covers on the bed had been pulled back up, covering her arms to about her shoulders.
When you arrived, when you got into the room, can you describe for the jury what your observations were about the condition of Tammy's body at that point?
I first checked her for a pulse, which she did not have. Her skin was colder than the room temperature. Her body was stiff. And I recognized that she did have some pink foam coming out of her mouth and down the side of her face, and she was deceased.
And you personally had made the determination for yourself that she was deceased because of her pulse, or what was the big factor?
Correct. It was a combination of her body being cold and the fact that she did not have a pulse.
And at this point in time, when you're investigating an unattended death, do you gather more information from family?
I do.
Did you do that in this case?
I did.
What did you do next?
I asked Chad about if she had any serious medical conditions or had been sick recently. He told me that she had been suffering from a pretty bad cold and that she didn't like to see the doctor very often, so that she hadn't been diagnosed with any serious medical conditions. He did tell me she had fallen in the driveway a few weeks prior that she had seen the doctor for, and she was going through menopause. He did say that she had suffered from low blood pressure and did have fainting spells once in a while as well.
Okay. And based on your recollection, was this information that Chad had relayed specifically to you at that point in time?
Yes, it was.
Did he say anything else about whether he believed that Tammy had any other major medical issues or injuries besides what you just talked about?
Not that he said to me.
Did he mention anything to you about Tammy having shaking fits at that point in time?
No,
Did he say anything about Tammy's sleep pattern generally?
no,
At what point in time, well, I'll withdraw that. As law enforcement, is it your role to determine whether or not it would be appropriate to have an autopsy?
it is not.
Whose role is that?
The coroner.
And then as you were there on scene, did you reach out to any other superior officers to get any help with your investigation?
I did.
Who did you reach out to?
I reached out to Detective Mattingly and Detective Kayakamanu.
And why did you reach out to them?
It's standard procedure when there's any kind of death, especially an unattended death, that we notify detectives to give them kind of the basis of what we've learned in our investigation to determine whether they need to respond or not.
Did they give you any instructions that you can recall?
Yes, they told me to take photos and then let the coroner decide whether or not to do an autopsy.
And in fact, did you take photos?
I did.
We'll get to those photos in just a moment. At that point in time, did you do anything else in your investigation?
No,
At any point in time, did you do anything to look at medications or anything else in the home?
I did.
When did you do that?
I did that shortly after I had taken some initial photos of Tammy's body while I was waiting for the deputy coroner to arrive.
And with respect to your time there and your observations, had you identified anything at that point that you felt like was suspicious about the scene?
No,
Now, were you basing that perspective upon the information that Chad was giving you?
yes,
And without getting into it, were you basing it upon any information that Garth had given you?
no, because he hadn't given me any information.
Besides Chad, did any other family members give you any information that morning?
No,
When you were talking to Chad that morning, was Garth within earshot of that conversation?
yes,
Did he ever voluntarily interject or contradict anything that his dad was saying?
he did not.
Did he try to add anything to the conversation?
No,
Your Honor, at this time, the state would like to offer up to the court and request admission of the state's proposed and marked exhibits 295A through. Sorry, Your Honor, 1 second. A through J. And I believe we have a stipulation that these will be admissible, Your Honor.
Any concern with broadcasting these, Mr. Wixom?
May we sidebar, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, counsel. The court will note in a sidebar, we just were reviewing these exhibits that are, as I understand, going to be admitted without objection. Somewhat graphic in nature, the courts determined would be inappropriate to broadcast those publicly. However, of course, they will be published to the jurors and the parties. And so we've made those arrangements for the publication of those once they're admitted. And Mr. Wixom, if you need to take a moment to get that set up, that's fine. And that's the purpose of the sidebar we just had.
Thank you, Your Honor. If I could have just a moment, please. And Judge, as we attempt to get set up electronically, I need to clarify for the record, the state does not intend to admit the photos in full sequence that we gave, Your Honor. May I correct and let the court know now which exhibits we're talking about?
Yeah, let's go through the admission process and then we'll go on to publication if you wish. So on the admission process, if you would set out in the record what you're being offered, and individually I'll ask defense if there's any objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. All of these photos for frame of reference are death scene photos of Tammy at the time that this officer responded to the call. They're marked as states 295D, as in David, through 295L. Is it-
Okay. Mr. Pryor, have you reviewed the photographs on exhibits 295D through L?
I have, Your Honor. My understanding, there's a stipulation to their admission.
Okay, without objection, then each of those individual photos, 295D through L, are all admitted as evidence. And in terms of publication, Mr. Wixom, if you just want to work with co-counsel, and if you need to review or view that other monitor to get things lined up, I understand the difficulty where you can't use the big screen because we're intentionally not broadcasting there. The monitors the jurors have will show the images. And Mr. Wixom, there's that light on the Elmo that I think helps with the shadow. If you could flip that light on. The
I believe I'm ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead
Thank you.
and reference each one, of course, as it's published.
Will do. So, ma'am, I'm going to show you what I believe are photos that you took at the scene. The first photo that I'm going to show you is a photo. It's 295D as in David. Can you see that, ma'am?
I can.
And ma'am, could you describe for the jury what is that a photo of?
This is a photo of Tammy's body as she was lying on the bed when I arrived.
As you look at that photo, can you recall what was it that you were trying to capture in that particular photo?
The position she was lying on the bed, the positions of the blanket, as well as her face.
Next, I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 295E. And ma'am, can you describe what you were trying to capture in that photo?
With this photo, I was trying to capture a closer, more focused view of her face and the foam that was on it.
Can you explain that a little bit more to the jury?
Yes, so a closer view of her face to focus more on the pinkish foam that's running down the side of her cheek.
Why did you feel like it was important to document that?
I like to document any bodily fluids that are present.
Next, I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 295F as in Frank. Can you tell the jury why you took that picture?
I took this photo to also show how her arms were lying when I arrived, uncovered by the blanket.
Why was it important to document how her arms were lying?
It's important just to document everywhere of how she's lying as she was when I get there, uncovered from the blanket, because from the initial photos, when she's covered, you can't see how her body is actually lying.
Okay. Next, I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 295G as in George. Please explain to the jury why you took that photo.
I took this photo because at this point, the coroner had arrived and she was completely uncovered from the blankets. So just another full body photo to show how she was lying on the bed.
Earlier, you had indicated that the mattress had been moved from the box spring.
Correct.
Does this photo capture that?
It does a little bit.
Can you explain that a little bit more for the jury's sake?
Yes. So on the top right of the photo, you can see that the mattress is shifted a few inches off of the box spring below it.
Why was that significant to document?
Typically, that isn't how your bed is laid out, and it was consistent with Chad stating that they had lifted her body back onto the bed, and that had shifted the mattress a little bit when they did that.
When Chad explained that they put the body back on the bed, had he explained that this is the position that they'd last left it in?
That's correct.
Next, I'm going to show you what's been marked as states exhibit 295H. Ma'am, can you take a moment and explain to the jury why you took that picture?
I took this photo to get a clear portrait of the other side of her face, as well as her hair and her left ear, which had a little bit of discoloration.
Does this document the discoloration in her left ear?
Or her right ear, I'm sorry.
So you're noting discoloration in the right ear?
Yes, it's a little bit red.
Can you just be a little bit more precise for the jury's sake where you see that discoloration?
Yes, the top of her ear is a little bit more red than the bottom part of her ear, which is a little bit more pale.
Was that anything that cued you into anything as part of your investigation?
Not particularly, no.
Next, I'm going to show you states 295L. Sorry. 295I. And why did you take that photo?
I took this photo because it was a little bit closer up of her face where you can see some blood around her nose and mouth, and then some more purple discoloration in the middle of her ear.
When you say blood around her nose and mouth, is that in reference to the sputum or some other source of blood?
It's in reference to the sputum.
Does this picture document from your perspective which direction you believe that sputum had been flowing from her?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what you believed it shows?
It shows that it flowed down the left side of her face.
And did you find that at the time to be consistent with the way that Mr. Daybell had explained that she had been positioned in the bed and fallen out of the bed?
Yes.
Next, I'm going to show you exhibit 295J. Why did you take that picture?
I took this photo to show the foam and blood running down the left side of her face.
At this point, why did you need to take this picture of the foam running down that side of her face?
Because I had never responded to an unattended death that had foam coming out of the mouth, so I felt it was important to document.
What was your intention of taking yet this photo when you had some other photos already of the pink foam?
This one specifically showed a little bit more of the blood running down the side of her face and not just the foam.
And at that point in the photo, being there in real time, could you tell if that blood running down her face, had it dried, any change in color at all?
I don't think I checked that at the time.
Next, I'm showing you 295K. Why'd you take that picture?
I took this photo because at this point the coroner had arrived and some of the fluid from her face had been cleared off. So I just took another photo after it had been cleared off.
When you say because the coroner had arrived, did the coroner give you any instruction about other photos that you should take?
No,
So you did this at your own behest?
I did.
Lastly, I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 295L. Can you please explain to the jury, please, why you took this photo?
I took this photo because at this point she had been moved to the mortuary and some time had passed. And so I took this photo to show some bruising and color changes that had happened on her skin.
When you say bruising, can you identify in that photo where you believed the bruising had identified itself?
Yes, on the top of her forehead showed a little bit more bruising, as did her mouth and her neck, chest area.
And at this point, do you see the pink foam in there anywhere?
I do not.
Had you done anything to wipe or remove the pink foam at that point?
I did not.
Based on your observations, did you check Tammy's body to see if it was cold?
I did.
And the result?
Her body was colder than the room temperature when I checked it.
Did you notice whether or not she had rigor mortis set in?
I did. Her body was stiff, which is consistent with that being set in from my experience.
In addition to noticing the pink sputum and what you thought was bruising, did you notice anything else on her body at any point?
I did.
What'd you notice?
After the coroner arrived and we had moved the blankets off her body, I did notice lividity on the back of her legs and on the lower back as well.
Can you explain to the jury, in case they don't know, what does the word lividity mean?
Lividity means when you pass, the blood in your body will pool to the lowest part and cause kind of reddish bruising, which is referred to as lividity.
And once again, where did you identify that lividity?
On the back of her thighs and on the back of the small of her back.
From your perspective, what did that tell you?
That told me from my experience that she would have been lying on her back for a significant amount of time after she died.
Now, at some point, I'll withdraw that. At some point in the interaction, did you go and have a conversation with the deputy coroner and the coroner?
I did.
And what was discussed there?
The cause of death was discussed, as well as whether an autopsy was to be performed, and as well as things that were said to the coroner.
Okay. And again, your role as law enforcement, do you have any role in determining cause of death?
No, I do not.
And do you have any role, as you understood it, to determine whether an autopsy should be performed?
No,
Did you ever discuss the potential for an autopsy with Chad?
no,
Did you ever hear him discuss that with anybody on scene?
no.
Mr. Wixom, are you done publishing the photos?
I am, I'm sorry.
Oh, if you are, go ahead and we'll turn the lights back up. We'll keep the audience seated where they are for the remainder of the day.
So I think this is the last couple of questions, ma'am. Did you eventually do any kind of medication check at that home?
I did.
Did you determine whether or not you believed Ms. Daybell had been on any medications?
Yes.
What did you determine that she was on?
I was told by Chad that she did take fluoxetine for depression and then some natural remedies and over-the-counter medications as well.
Was there any evidence, as far as you're concerned, that she could have been overdosed on something?
No,
And with respect to anything else about that investigation that caused you any concern about anything suspicious at that point in time?
no, there was not.
You know, that's all the questions I have at this time.
All right. All right, cross-examination, Mr. Pryor.
Thank you, Judge. Officer Greenhalgh, you prepared a report in regards to this incident, is that right?
Yes,
And at the bottom of your report, you made mention that the coroner determined an autopsy was not necessary unless the family wanted one, which they did not.
correct.
So from what I read from your report was that you discussed the option of whether an autopsy would be performed and the coroner determined that it wasn't necessary. And then subsequent to that, the family decided they did not want an autopsy. Would that be fair?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Now, I also noted, did you have a chance to talk to Brenda Dye and Cami and Deputy Coroner Wilmore about this case in detail?
at the scene I did, yes.
Okay, did you discuss the fact that there were some old bruises on Tammy's arms?
Yes,
And that, were you aware that Coroner Dye made note of that they were old, from some time before this incident, bruises on both of her arms as well, correct? She just testified to it, Judge.
Overruled.
Fact that Miss Dye noted in her coroner's report that there were old bruises on her arms, correct?
I wasn't aware if she knew the age of them.
Okay, but you are aware that there was a discussion with you folks about the fact that there were some old bruises on Tammy's body, correct?
That there were bruises, correct.
You were also aware that when you looked for the medication, you saw the it's Prozac, right? Fluoxetine?
I'm not sure what the generic is.
Okay. Acetaminophen, right? Some ibuprofen,
Correct.
Vitality extracts, which are, like non-traditional medication, correct?
Correct. And like essential oils.
Like essential oils that she would use. And then Chad talked to you a little bit about the fact that she was experimenting with essential oils as well, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then some extra strength acetaminophen. There was also some cough medicine that was found there as well, correct?
Yes.
And that's important because when Chad first spoke with you, he said that she was having coughing fits, right?
He did.
And you were able to confirm the fact that there was cough medicine as part of the medicine that was at the table at least at that evening, correct?
Correct.
You weren't able to tell whether she took it or not that night, but clearly on her side of her bed, there was cough medicine, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then again, some essential oil. What is essential oil respiratory blend? I don't understand what respiratory blend means when it applies to essential oils.
That's what the bottle was labeled.
Did you happen to look into what that's for?
I did not.
Well, the word respiratory implies to me that there has something to do with breathing. You didn't look any further than just noting that it was it was some respiratory essential oil.
Correct.
Okay. And then below that one, you put a note that there was also a supplement for bruising and sore muscles.
Yes.
So she was taking supplements for some bruising that she must have been experiencing and sore muscles, right?
I assume so.
Okay. Well, those are the ones that the family showed you were that she was taking regularly, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, again, I'll go back to what he initially told you that she got up at about midnight, right?
Correct.
Military time always confuses me. So 0000, right?
Yes. That's midnight.
And then at approximately 5:40, he felt the bed and she slid off the bed. And that's when he realized that she had passed, right?
Yes. That's what he told me.
Okay. And he was pretty shook up about this, wasn't he?
Yes.
Far more shook up than anybody else in the house, right?
Yes.
He was more disturbed about this than his daughter who eventually showed up, right?
I didn't see or observe his daughter after he showed up.
He was far more despondent than his son who was there as well, right?
Correct.
Okay. And what you observed in terms of the mattress, in terms of the position of the mattress, was consistent with what Chad told you in terms of why the mattress was moved. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So there's nothing unusual about the mattress, nothing there, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And as far as medical conditions, again, while he was discussing with you, he was pretty despondent, pretty upset, right?
Yes.
Okay. And as while he was trying to talk to you, he made something that she had taken some steroid shots for some sore muscles, that she had fallen a few months ago in the driveway and injured her arm. Did he happen to mention to you that she was having incidents of falling, unexplained falls that she was making?
Not that I remember.
Don't remember that? You didn't have a body cam on either, though, did you?
I did not.
You didn't have a recorder with you either, right?
No.
And you were going to an unattended death. Are you issued a body cam?
I was.
Are you issued a recorder?
No.
Okay, so you are issued a body cam, it wasn't available, or was that one broken too?
I believe it was charging at the time.
Okay, all right. And then he mentioned that she had been feeling sick, had a cold, and that she had low blood pressure and that she'd been fainting occasionally.
Yes.
Okay. Now, did he ever mention to you the fact that Tammy Daybell suffered from anemia?
Not that I recall.
Okay. When you looked at the pink foaming, did you happen to do some research on what causes that pink foaming?
I did not.
Okay, so you're not aware of the medical condition someone would have that would cause their mouth to foam at the mouth, right?
I'm not.
Okay. At the time you showed up, there were no bruising on the neck or the arms, like recent bruising. Is that correct?
Correct.
And there was no indication of a struggle, correct?
Correct.
And there was nothing in the position of the pillows or the sheets or anything in the bedroom that would indicate there was any sort of a fight, struggle, or altercation within that bedroom. Is that right?
Correct.
And then he also told you, Chad told you that through the coroner that Tammy had an occasion to have minor shaking fits, right?
He did say that to the coroner, not to me though.
With seizures, right?
I'm not 100% certain what he said.
And then were you there to talk to the daughter, Emma?
No.
But you put in your report that Emma mentioned that her and her mother were trying to do that clogging thing and that her mother had been slowing down the last couple of months. You're aware of that as well, right?
Yes, that was relayed to me through the coroner.
So the mother or the daughter, Emma, had confirmed that her mother had been slowing down and wasn't as active as she had been previously, right?
Not to me.
Okay. But Chad did talk to you about significant fainting, seizures, a number of maladies, right?
He had mentioned fainting. He didn't mention seizures to me though.
Chad told the coroner that sometimes Tamara had minor shaking fits consistent with seizure activity.
That was what the coroner. had
Oh,
told
I'm
me.
sorry. Okay. Okay. So at this point, after this was done, it was the determination made that it was not a homicide or any foul play as a result of this, correct?
I'm not sure exactly what the determination was that was made by the coroner.
Okay, and we'll get to that with the coroner, but from your pictures and your assessment, it didn't appear that there was any foul play from the pictures that you took. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Judge, I have nothing else. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Just a few, Your Honor, a few questions.
Very well.
Officer Greenhalgh, you were just asked some questions about a body cam.
Correct.
At that time at the Fremont County Sheriff's Office, was there any requirement that you have and use a body cam for any purpose?
No.
And you said yours was charging.
Yes.
Does that happen sometimes during your shift?
Yes.
You were asked some questions about, right question about by the time you showed up to the scene. Do you remember that reference from defense counsel?
Yes.
And you were asked questions about essential oils and some non-prescription items that were found.
Yes.
Now, did you have any information outside of what Chad had told you about whether it was Tammy who'd been using those things?
Not outside of what Chad had told me.
Did you have any information other than what Chad told you about how long those items had been in the home?
No.
And to be clear again, at the time that you responded, Tammy was cold to the touch.
Yes.
And as far as you knew, she had had rigor mortis set in.
Yes.
You were just asked questions about having been told by Chad, the coroner having been told by Chad that Tammy had been having seizures. Remember that question?
Yes, I do.
But to be clear, that was never told to you directly.
That's correct.
So then is it accurate then that Chad told you some things and then told other things to the coroner?
Yes.
Your Honor, I don't have any further questions.
All right, thank you. That will conclude then the testimony of this witness. Is the state intending to recall Officer Greenhalgh?
I'm sorry.
Will the state be recalling the witness? No, all right, the defense.
And Judge, I also subpoenaed Officer Greenhalgh to be there, but I'm going to excuse her from that subpoena. She won't need to show up, and I think we've covered everything that we need to cover at this point.
All right, so that excuses you from any further subpoena. You're released from those. Thank you for appearing to testify. And you may step down from the witness stand.